There's no way to dance around this detail of this figure without seeming like a perv. So I've been feeling the glare of neglect from the other DC Direct / DC Collectibles figures that I have from the Arkham Asylum and Arkham City games. So I figured, you know what, let's do a very quick lightning round style type of review compilation for the other figures that I have in series. That primarily came out of the 4-packs that were derived from those Batman figures and Joker figures that I used to compare to the McFarlane figures that I then covered in those videos. So if you guys want to check those out, links are going to be found either in the cards or in the descriptions, or they're going to end up in the end screen. So before the year wraps up, I'm going to do my due diligence and cover the rest. We're going to start off with what I mainly consider to be the worst out of the bunch that you see before you here. Let's start with the boy wonder, Robin. It may or may not be obvious as to why I consider it to be the worst out of all these that I've kind of collected here. And again, he was thrown into a 4-pack from DC Direct that was there to kind of celebrate the release of Arkham City. And so I took him. And for that moment, I was having rose-colored glasses and thought to myself, cool, I got myself a Robin figure from the Arkham series. But now, years later, I finally was able to remove those glasses and finally decide that this is ultimately not that great of a figure if you really think about it. Because for one, kind of obvious to see here on camera, he's pretty stilted as far as positioning, sculpting, and detail is concerned, especially around the pants area. The pants area is just very plain, very generic kind of stylistic choices with the pants and the boots. But on top of that, there's no real definition as far as how his orientation is concerned. I mean, yes, you do have basic points of articulation. You have elbow joints going on right here on both of his arms. You have no wrist swivel, but you do have a bicep swivel right there that you can see before you, as well as an upper arm swivel that only goes about that far because of the shorthand cape here. Then you do have technically head articulation, but the head itself is very minute as far as detail because it is, after all, hooded by the design choice of Robin having a hood in the Arkham City game. It also doesn't help that the only part of his head that we can blatantly see is his face, which is decaled very very terribly. I mean, he legitimately has a shooketh face. Look at that thing. Jesus Christ. You probably should pull the hood completely all together or just wear a mask like Batman does. Now, I will give him this as we kind of navigate our way down the figure. You'll see that you do have some pretty serviceable detailing and sculpting going on around his chest area to develop the armor that he's wearing, but nothing really comes across as spectacular as you navigate down to the pants and the boots. And again, there's no real definition. Yes, you do have leg joints here at the top that can move up and down, but they don't move outwards. They don't swivel. There's no swiveling of any kind except for one briefly here in the shins. And then you do have a knee joint that bends only about that far. But I'm scared to press it any further because after all this time, almost a full-on decade later, guess what happened? It broke. As I was kind of fiddling with the figure prior to this review, I took a slight little nudge on this right knee for the figure and it broke off. And so the joints that were holding it all together are still stuck in place there. So my only options are to either leave it as is, like you see before you there, it's tight enough to fit in there and not fall off very easily, or I can super glue it, but then that'll render the articulation useless. Other than that, nothing going on in the ankle or in the toesies, so he's pretty static as is. And to add insult to injury, you'll notice that his hands have holes etched in there. That's because he's meant to hold a baton or a pole staff kind of weapon that he does have in the original Arkham City game. However, sadly, my version here through that 4-pack that I bought did not come with the staff weapon. So he's pretty much as is, and therefore back to the lineup he goes. Next up is actually going to be his successor, if you will, Nightwing right here, also from Arkham City, though only playable through the challenge maps and also makes occasional appearances, but he definitely takes it a little bit above as far as quality and sculpting is concerned over the Robin figure over there, because I've always dug Nightwing's suit as far as an aesthetic and look and style. I always appreciated the matte black with the blue logo kind of going across his chest and into his shoulders and kind of interwoven within his sleeves. I've always dug that look, and it looks like they did a very good job of kind of bringing that look over in Arkham City, not just from a design standpoint but also from the figure standpoint. Albeit the head is a little, it's not bad, but I feel like it's just a little oversized for his composition going on right here in this figure format. So I don't know if it's just me, but it just looks just a little off. But as far as detailing, at least he doesn't have the very, oh my god, look on his face like Robin did back there. So at least I'm fortunate for that. Moving on down, you can see that the sculpting around the body as well as the musculature and the matte finish is pretty good and well defined, so I'm appreciating that quite an awful lot. And also the articulation is a bit more serviceable as well. You have a full 360 degrees on the head right there. You do have full 360 movement on the top of the shoulder as well as in and out about that far. Bicep swivel that allows movement all the way across, as well as an elbow joint that you can then bend. And look at that, wrist swivels. Actual wrist swivels that you can move about. And then we get down to the legs now. Sadly, no torso joints of any kind, but you do get a ball joint at the top of the leg that allows it to move upwards and a little bit downwards and a little far back, but not too much, because once again, there's that butt sculpt. And then we're also able to give him a slight split movement with the legs about that far, which is already points above Tim Drake's Robin back there. And then we get down to the knees, where you have one joint that allows it to bend about 90 degrees, and then a swivel joint here in the shin that allows movement horizontally like that. But you can blatantly see what I was referring to as far as the definition going on in the legs. You can definitely see that there's actual composition in his legs, as opposed to Robin's that are just like two little popsicle sticks by comparison. So it gives a sense of dynamicy. Is that even a word? A dynamic look to Nightwing that's a whole lot better than Robin's. Even furthermore, if you couldn't already tell, my version of Nightwing that came in the 4-pack for Arkham City actually did come with batons as weapon accessories that he can either holster on his back, like you see before you right there, or of course you can always remove them. Of course, be gentle with it since they are popped into place rather firmly, and you can fit them into the molded hands to then make him look like he's wearing holding his batons. And there you go. So the legs are a little tough to get them into a posable state, but other than that, you can clearly see the jump in quality of him versus Robin. And that's really crazy considering that they're both part of the same line and the same game. So I don't know why DC Direct decided to kind of pay a little bit more attention to one over the other, but it is what it is. Next up, we're going back to Arkham Asylum in the form of Scarecrow right here in the middle. I'm saving the ladies for last because it's technically the same lady, so we're going to be able to kill two Harleys with one stone, if you will. But before that, we're going to get to Scarecrow here, which frankly, I feel is probably my favorite out of this specific bunch that I have right here, because you can see I am loving the look and the detail and the overall attention to the sculpting and everything that they put forth as far as designing this specific version of Scarecrow. Now, albeit I do understand that he looks significantly different than he would appear so in his reemergence in Arkham Knight, but I've always dug this version of Scarecrow. He looks intimidating. He legitimately looks scary and terrifying, as he's supposed to be, being the king of nightmares that he is amongst Batman's rogue gallery. And so you have an awful lot of detail going around his frail body. You actually have some definition in the look of the bones and the flesh. It actually pops out and sticks out and kind of makes itself well known, as well as the ragged, tattered look to the pants, as well as the rope holding his mask and his pants up together. It just comes across really, really awesome, as well as the very lanky kind of look. I feel like, yeah, this is frankly my favorite out of this bunch right here. And his articulation is nothing to scoff at either. You have a decent amount going on in his head that allows full 360-degree movement. I'm sorry, I didn't really demonstrate it very well. 360-degree movement, as well as a slight little pivot up and down, which is actually I'm very grateful that they included, considering that he has that arched kind of sculpting going around his back per his personality. So it's kind of nice that they threw in that little nudge to let him look up so that it doesn't look like it's always constantly looking down. You actually are able to make him look forward. Then moving on to the arms, you do have full 360 degrees up on the top shoulder joint, as well as being able to flex it inwards and outwards. Bending at the elbow 90 degrees, you do have a slight bi-swept swivel, as well as a swivel on the wrist. It's a little closer to the forearm than it is on the wrist, but it is there. That allows 360 degree movement. An actual torso joint, considering how warped his torso is to begin with. It's cool that they actually threw that in as well. And then some joints going on throughout the legs. You got one at the top here that allows movement up and down. Nothing to split up horizontally or move the legs inwards and outwards, but you do have a thigh swivel right about there that allows 360 degrees. And then you do have a shin joint that allows movement 360 degrees. Sadly, no joints in the knees, which I think would have been appreciated considering how stuck he is in this pose. I think it would have been a little nice to at least give it a sense of balance, especially when posing him in this way, because I understand that it was mainly stuck in that way to give him that overarched creepy look, but at the same time, for posability, I would have appreciated knee joints there. And then going over to his claw hand over here with the needles that look amazing. Honestly, I really dig this look. You do have a swivel at the base of the glove itself, so you can actually rotate it right about right there, and you can get the posability right there. Nothing going on in his fingers or on his hand, but the fact that they were able to make this thing work, complete with tendril-like coils and cables going to the needles here, that's remarkable for a DC Direct. So, despite my little finicky quips or qualms that I have with the knee joints here, overall, Scarecrow is personally my favorite out of this whole assortment. And then to make him even better, he comes with his own little sack. His sack of magic dust, his magic hallucinogenic drug, as he had in the Arkham Asylum game. He comes with an added little pouch accessory here that's also really well detailed and sculpted and perfectly fits into his non-needled hand as so. So yeah, I really dig this figure, if you couldn't already tell, and this is my personal favorite. Now, being that he's my favorite, David, why didn't you just end the review with him as the last one to close off on? Well, that's because we actually have two particular figures here that are practically one and the same, but from two different games. And that's, of course, the Harleys. Harley Quinn from Arkham Asylum wearing the nurse outfit, and then we have Harley Quinn from Arkham City wearing a much more traditional red and black outfit right there. Now, of course, it's a matter of preference as to which design you favor the best, but the other main reason why I waited until the end of the review to cover these two is because if you look just a little closely, but not too close, you'll notice that they're practically the same figure, albeit with a couple of changes when it comes to the sculpting and the detail, because mainly around the bodice and the corset, as well as the leg boots, you can see that they kind of recycled some assets and some sculpture going on with those particular parts to then reuse them in the Arkham City figure and do a simple color swap, which makes sense. You want to be able to save a little bit of money, but at the same time change enough to make the acquiring of that second figure worthwhile. And I think they nailed it out of the park. Each figure comes with its own set of improvements and differences to make them stand out, while at the same time having things here or there that don't exactly make them the best figures out of the bunch. When it comes to Harley from Arkham Asylum here, I like that added detail of the warden's card or ID card on her chest area there, as well as the paint job going around the face and the nets around the fish leg stockings or whatever they're called around the leg areas right there. It's a nice little detail. Those are actual cloth nets, so it's cool that they threw those in, as well as just the overall paint job going around throughout there. Now, what I don't appreciate, and there's no way to dance around this detail of this figure without seeming like a perv. And I'm sorry. I'm genuinely sorry. But the skirt piece is its own piece. It's its own piece. as you see like that. And it's annoying when trying to fiddle with the figure for posability, for science, for the content. That's the only reason why I fiddle with it. And in doing so, it causes that piece to just keep bubbling up and down. Whether or not this is an actual problem, that depends on you. But for me, it causes a little bit of an issue, a little bit of a hindrance, and it gets in my way. So it would have been nice if that was just a piece stuck to the figure and it didn't have anything to do. Anyways, I'm gonna move on now. Anyways, that's the Arkham Asylum version. Moving on to the Arkham City version. Obviously, my favorite clash of colors is black on red, so it's cool to see that this one favors that. And I also like the paint detail going around the face, kind of yearning for that kind of widow look that she had in Arkham City. If you know what I'm referring to, obviously you get it. And then moving on down, I like the added detail of the loose chain. That's an actual detail here on the belt. But just like with the Arkham Asylum Harley Quinn, her belt is actually its own separate piece. So similarly, it kind of moves up and down, but on the bright side, it does allow you to see some added detail of the tattoos going on right there throughout her body. Now, as far as accessories, this is where it gets actually kind of strange and gives me a little bit of a Mandela effect, because it turns out that Joker was not the one who came with the Scarface, Jokerized Scarface doll. It wasn't Joker who came with that. So my apologies, but I'm adding my first ever addendum or retraction to one of my videos earlier this year, which was the Joker DC Direct versus McFarlane Toys comparison video. Because in that video, I said that Joker from DC Direct came with the Scarface accessory. However, it was actually Harley Quinn who came with it in the Arkham Asylum 4-pack. Moving on to Arkham City Harley Quinn, she only came with one accessory, which is this rather decent looking gun that you see right here in her trigger finger. That's very obvious where it's supposed to fit. But that is the Magnum gun that she has right there. That is color schemed the exact same way as her outfit, black with red accents, as well as the spades going on right there on the actual barrel of the gun. So overall, looks pretty decent, looks pretty nice, and fits right in place into her right hand with the extended trigger finger like so. And there you have it. Now, for articulation, I'm going to specifically just use the Arkham City Harley Quinn because unfortunately, let's just say that there's enough wrong with my Arkham Asylum Harley and enough has broken within her that I do not want to screw around with said articulation. I'm not going to. One of her pigtails actually broke off. I had to super glue that back on, so her head is practically stuck that way. And her left leg is coming apart right there, and the only thing holding it in place is the fishnet stocking. So yeah, we're not doing that. We're not messing around with that. So we're not going to deal with the articulation. She's pretty much stuck as is, but we're going to use Arkham City Harley Quinn for the articulation, which is pretty basic. You got full 360-degree movement on the head, ball joint up at the arm that allows movement vertically 360 degrees, as well as a bicep swivel horizontally, bend at the elbow, wrist swivel. You're starting to get the idea. It's pretty standard. However, there is no torso joint, unfortunately, but you do have a ball joint, a slanted joint at the top of the leg that allows movement about that far out and that far back, just ever so slightly before you start to feel some hesitance. And then you do have a knee joint that bends about just a little under 90 degrees, to be honest. And then no ankle articulation of any kind. So the pieces are actually pretty static, moving from the knee to the bottom. So that's where my ultimate complaint with the Harley Quinn figures comes into play, which is that the posability behind these girls, despite my, breakage going on with Arkham Asylum Quinn, is actually pretty static to begin with, so you might as well leave them as is right out of the box. And with that said, that closes out my remaining DC Direct or DC collectible figures from the Arkham City and Arkham Asylum games that I currently own. Now, it's very much difficult to want to acquire any more figures from those games or that particular line, or even some of the Arkham Origins ones that I unfortunately do regret not getting, like Black Mask or Deathstroke from that particular series. But you can see that we've come a long way as far as developing toys for those games and those properties to then give them their proper justice, because though there are some redeeming factors with some of these guys, specifically Scarecrow, with the amount of detail they were able to jam pack into what you can kind of consider a 6-inch, though him hunched over, he's probably more like 5.5. It still has its moments of limitations, especially with a figure like Robin, who's pretty much a doll, just static there, looking at him, looking off into the distance, bewildered, wondering where his father figure has gone to. And I'm not talking about Batman, I'm talking about his actual father. Anyways, if by some chance you guys have not checked out my previous comparison videos of the DC Direct Joker and Batman from Arkham Asylum to the McFarlane versions that came out not too long ago, and whether or not they're better or worse, be sure to check them out on my channel, or you can check out the one that's being shown right now on screen. Take care, guys, and as always, stay humble.